from aviation, underwater, fishing, caving, and so many more topics. But today I am again thrilled to be having a conversation with Michael Clark. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, how's it going, JR?
Michael, as I understand it, has been a professional photographer, I think, since 1996. So for a while, I think he started when he was 10, and he's a former physicist turned photographer. And I had to write down all the publications and the list of clients that he has had. He has worked for 20th Century Fox, Red Bull, Patagonia, North Face, Nikon and Fuji, Apple. Publications include New York Times, Sports Illustrated, Biker Magazine, Surfer Magazine, Nat Geo Adventure, La Sportiva, North Face, Patagonia, Adobe, and I could go on. So I am thrilled to have you join us today, Michael, to talk about some of your career, some of your methodology. Welcome to our show.
Thanks. I've been around for a long time, as people can tell. It's been a long path, and it goes way back to when I was really young, and I started drawing things, and we found out I had this gift to draw things photographically real, doing everything from painting to sculpture to you name it. Photography was one of those things I tried out in my teenage years. And then by the time it came around for university, I decided I wanted to do something challenging, and then worked in physics for a couple of years, and it was rock climbing that kind of brought me back to the photography. My career coincided with my starts in rock climbing. Well, I mean, I think for most pro photographers, when they start out, they're shooting on their own, what we call on spec, meaning that you just go out and create images, speculating that somebody might want to license those images from you. So for me, it was definitely the thing that I was super excited about, and I pretty much only shot climbing and submitted images to magazines. So my first 3 clients were Climbing Magazine, Rock and Ice Magazine, and Outdoor Photographer. And that's what kind of kicked it off for me. Those were my first 3 submissions got published, which is kind of an amazing story. From there, you know, those images started being used by the clothing manufacturers like Patagonia or Black Diamond, and the gear manufacturers for advertisements in the climbing mags. And then from there, I just started shooting all the different sports, and it's lots of years of trying to make it all work. Well, way back in the 80s, when I started taking pictures, not professionally, but just as an amateur, my first camera was an Olympus OM1 that my dad had. And then I've been shooting with Nikon for, since the mid-80s. Over the course of my career, I shot film for the first half of my career. That's actually a film image of Chris Sharma right there. And then transitioned into digital with Nikon as well. I think my last film camera was the Nikon F5 back in the 90s. And I actually, as a physicist, worked on some of the chips that were used in cameras as imaging sensors. So that kind of gave me a little bit of an idea about how digital was working. And the funny thing is, along this course, I shot a lot of medium format photography as well with film. I had a Hasselblad, I had a Mamiya for a while, and I've had a Hasselblad digital camera as well for a while, but now my main camera is the Fujifilm GFX 100, which is their 100 megapixel medium format camera. So It's a wide range of cameras, just whatever works for the job, essentially. I'm enjoying the move to. So.
And you shoot for both Nikon. I know you've done a lot of work for both Nikon and Fuji.
Yeah.
What in your mind are some of the big advancements as the technologies have evolved? Can you talk a little bit about the difference between media, about those things?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get your thoughts on what you see some of the highlights in the evolution of those technologies. There's a lot going on in the mirrorless space right now. It seems like innovation is making its way back into photography, which is exciting. what's your take on some of the pros and cons on some of those advancements?
Man, that's a long conversation, I suppose. But to back up and answer your previous question, most of my stuff is thought through and conceptual, and then we go out and produce it. But it just depends on the shoot. Sometimes you're out there and you just have to roll with whatever you've got and make images, on the fly too. So it's a mix. But in terms of mirrorless DSLRs and that whole world, mirrorless is definitely the future because you can do in-body image stabilization on the sensor, where the sensor is moving around to help stabilize the camera. And as we go up in like that 100 megapixel Fuji film, that's critical because the more the resolution, the more sensitive the camera is to camera shake. Sure. To even be able to use the camera and get a sharp picture, that's kind of critical to have stabilization in the camera and the lenses. Faster frame rates, faster autofocus potentially. We're not quite there yet with all of the cameras that are mirrorless. So for sports photography, it's still somewhat limiting for the mirrorless cameras unless you have the Sony A9, which is wicked fast autofocus. But I think the next round of the next round of Canon and Nikon cameras will have much faster autofocus for their mirrorless series. Fujifilm, smaller cameras already have crazy fast autofocus as well. So it just depends on what your needs are. For most people that aren't sports photographers, mirrorless is already waiting. It's beyond good enough. And I'm not sure I would recommend to anybody to buy a DSLR anymore because it's just it's outdated technology. And while they still work great, my 850 is still an excellent camera. It doesn't have some of the benefits that you have in a mirrorless camera. And a good example of this, just to show the stark difference, is I did a shoot last year with the Marine Special Forces out in North Carolina, and it was all night.
I saw that. I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, it's on the website, I think, under the commercial stuff, but
I'll look for it.
It's all shot at night at like 1/10 of a second shutter speed, handheld at f1.4, and there's no way I could have got those images with a DSLR. So there's just some pretty stark advantages. Plus, the mirrorless is focusing on the sensor, so it's much more active autofocus. So that's another key advantage. It's just going to get better and better, and we're all going to be using mirrorless here pretty soon in the next year or so.
Yeah, I noticed that with the new Canon EOS R5, they seem to be putting a lot of emphasis on video with some of the specs that they've released. Apparently there are 2 new chips within the camera.
Yeah, for me, I have way too much gear. I have an insane amount of gear. I have, 5 different camera systems, 2 different manufacturers. I'm kind of spoiled in that that 100 megapixel Fujifilm GFX 100 has the best image quality I've ever seen in any camera I've ever used. It has incredibly fast autofocus for medium format. It's not as fast as, say, a Nikon D5 or a Canon 1DX, but it's only a hair's breadth difference, so it depends on how fast my subject's going to be moving. If it works for about 90% of my stuff, so that's typically the camera I take. Because nothing else can touch it image quality wise. But it's also a matter of lighting as well, because I do a lot of lighting with strobes and flashes. So depending on how far it is to get to the location, I'll figure out what I can actually carry, and or how many assistants I have, or if I have an assistant, can I get a whole bunch of gear out there to do something super unique? And that usually is driven by the concept, like some of these whitewater kayak images. That was 400 pounds of lighting gear and camera gear carried down a 1,000-foot cliff to get to that waterfall. These are quite involved, the shoots, and some of them are, less gear and more just go out there and make pictures. So it just kind of depends on the assignment.
Okay. You mentioned lighting, and I'd be remiss not to bring that up because I think you're one of the people that are pushing the envelope of what outdoor lighting can be. In fact, I think you're probably the first person to do a surfing session where you were trying to basically outshine the sun in a surf shot, and I believe that it was around the time that you and I started talking about, and you had some, you know, challenges for what you were trying to do, and somebody referred you. I think we were working maybe with Lucas Gilman at the time for another Nikon assignment, where we were working with a Ninja Atomos attached to their new ProRes out of a Z6. And that was the time we got connected. So talk us through lighting and how you're pushing the envelope with what's possible with some of these outdoor lighting shots, and why, you know, you are doing some of the things that you're doing maybe on some of these shots, like the surf shot. Just kind of tell us that story.
Yeah, so I mean, that starts with one of the ice climbing images, and/or this image you're showing us with the whitewater kayakers, is that I tested out first with one strobe on the ice climbing in these kayakers, and then I thought, well, if I can overpower the sun from maybe 50 to 60 feet away with one strobe, can I, like 500 feet away, so like a football field and a half, is the distance we were from the surfer.
Wow.
Moving all over the place. So I had a bunch of assistants moving the strobes as the surfer, you know, came across the wave. We actually got one picture, and there it is right there, actually. It's not necessarily the best surfing picture I've ever shot, but it is proof of concept that we can actually pull this off. You know, and my buddy Brian Billman was there with us. He's one of the most legendary surf photographers ever in the history of photography. He's seen hundreds of photographers try to do this in the daytime and never be able to pull it off. And the reason we could pull it off was because of this technology called high sync from Linchrome, which actually allows you to shoot at basically any shutter speed you want, up to 1/8,000th of a second. And still sync the strobe. So it's a very complex technology that's not that hard to use, but you're essentially triggering the flash before you trigger the camera and just taking a slice of the light that's being emitted by the flash. So it just allows easy things you could never do. And this shot was done at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, in full sun. And the fact that we even got anything was really pretty insane. I'm kind of shocked, you know, that it worked, even though I was hoping it would work. But that really opened up this world of lighting in the outdoors to using, not that I use 5 flashes all the time now, usually it's 1 or 2, you know, but that means I have to take a bunch of flashes with me on a lot of assignments. But it also creates these images that are completely different than anything that's ever been done before. Like that surf shot, nothing like that's ever been done in the history of photography.
It's really amazing.
You know, a funny story was, I put this on Facebook, I think, talking about how it had never been done in photography, and there was a gentleman who wrote me and said, he was in his 80s at that point, and said, oh, this has been done by the military in World War II. He's like, we had a 500-pound strobe in a B-1 bomber flying at night over Germany, taking pictures with flash from 2,000 feet up of the militia where they're making all the, you know, ammunition and stuff. I'm like, okay, well, it's never been billions, so kind of a funny side note there.
Tell us a bit more about the military experience. I'll try to find it on the site. Is it under your commercial work that you've done?
That's MARSOC, M-A-R-S-O-C, all caps, I think. That job came up. It's, you know, I'm not usually somebody who shoots military stuff. There you go. But it came up and it was pretty interesting. And my grandfather was Marine, so I thought, hey, this could be pretty interesting. And MARSOC is the Marine Special Forces. They're the elite of the elite Marines. You know, and unlike the SEALs and the Green Berets, you don't hear much about the Marine Special Forces. And that's the way they like it, I think, because they're on the most top secret missions. I mean, you don't hear about what they're doing. But these guys are pretty impressive individuals, I found out. And we shot all at night because these guys don't go out in the daytime. They land at night, they do their mission, and they get out of there. So it's always under darkness. And so basically the entire shoot was at night by moonlight. We did have a few LED lights that we were using. And that's where I used my Nikon C6 for this one, because the IBIS in it really allowed me to shoot at crazy low light
and stabilization.
Exactly, and at like ISO 12,800. And we did use the Outex. The Outex on my Fuji FX 100 to shoot video with that camera.
Nice.
Because we were on a boat swimming into shore for part of this. We were doing a video shoot and a still shoot. I was the still photographer, but also shot some of the video for this. And you know, so it's just a wide range of tools. And the great thing about the Outex is I had so much gear with me for this shoot and for this. I had 3 shoots lined up back to back. So I had strobe gear, I had 2 camera systems, I had the Outex underwater housing, you know, to shoot video with. And also we even used the Outex. This might explain what the people are doing, you know, that you were talking about earlier, because we did do some explosives training with them, where we were capturing what they were doing, like setting explosives. It was with plastique, you know, it's huge, but you don't want the camera just naked out there, because there's all this like detritus after the explosion goes off that like blows in the wind, so you'd have that all over your camera. And that would be setting off alarm at the airport for sure. So, you know, make sure your camera's protected from that kind of, you need a cover for your, it's sealed, and then you can rinse that off after the fact, and not have issues. But it was just a wide variety of stuff. It was a wild shoot to just see what they're doing.
Yeah, that is so cool to see. We sell to the armed forces quite a bit, and you know, I'm down in Camp Pendleton here in California every once in a while, meeting with Marines there. And again, you know, they don't tell us for all the reasons that they're using it, but they use it on everything from training. They do a lot of pool type training, all the way to using prototype lenses that they have to access that are infrared, night vision, and that kind of thing. And so it's always cool to see. And I didn't even know about your outing, so that's really cool that you got to use it there and experience some of what they were doing.
Awesome.
So tell us, you know, tell us more about that shoot, because again, you know, I've been dealing with them and selling them products on everything from training, like they do underwater, you know, fighter pilot ejection training, helicopter rescue training.
Yeah.
They do, of course, beach, you know, landings, and they do amphibious reconnaissance missions and all kinds of stuff. I've heard about them using night vision lenses that work on existing DSLR and mirrorless bodies. And those are just the things that I know of. And you probably saw some other cool applications.
Well, we were on just about every kind of aircraft or boat that you can imagine. They did night jumps out of the Osprey aircraft that you see there. And we actually had Steve Farrington, one of the Red Bull Air Force guys that worked with a bunch. He was there helping do the filming, where he would jump out of the back of the Osprey. And he actually had one of these setups with the DSLR camera mounted to his helmet with the like night vision lens on it.
Wow.
To shoot them as they're both skydiving out of the back of that. And I was in a separate Osprey aircraft shooting the other one that the Marines were in, and then we switched, so we had a bunch of flight time. I think we spent like $1 billion in jet fuel for 2 days. It was kind of crazy, but you know, we were in boats, we were all over the place. You know, they were
so
wet.
Cool.
You know,
I had Jim Kopernik, who is one of the Sigma ambassadors, who does a lot of aviation photography. So I'm going to have to call him back and brag about some of these stories to him. He had some wild stuff. I want to hang out with you more. You're hanging out with
Yeah.
Red Bull pilots and Green Beret Marines jumping out of planes. I want to carry your gear for you on your next shoot, okay?
All right. Well, that's my test for assistance. It's like basically, okay, here's a 100-pound bag, pick it up, walk over there, walk back. All right, you're hired. You know, it's just essentially getting all here to the location, and oftentimes it's the biggest issue.
Okay.
So,
Michael, what are some of your favorite stories of shots that maybe don't get a lot of recognition, right? And I talk about this with photographers all the time. You know, sometimes you think that a particular set of shots are your best, and they don't get picked for some reason, or they're not the ones that get sort of the glory. And I was wondering if you have stories of certain shots that you feel didn't get sort of fame, but that are some of your favorites.
yeah, I mean, there's tons of experiences where there's images from those experiences where the experience was arduous, or, you know, I almost died, or I've got tons of these near-death stories. You know, and it's interesting, there's one of the sea kayaking shots that I sent you, I think, where it's just a sea kayaker out there with this incredible color in the background. It was actually shot for Red Bull, amazingly, if you believe that. Yeah, that's it right there, I think, on the right. And it, you know, it's very understated. It's not an adventure sports image. It's more just, I mean, sea kayaking can be definitely adventurous, that's for sure, but it's not the high octane adventure sports, at least that most people think about when they think of my work. And I think it's just been really gorgeous shots. And it was, you know, for me personally, the experience was amazing to just be there. And I'm one of those guys who, you know, is a climber, you know, cyclist, skier. Ice climbing's my favorite sport. But, you know, I always thought sea kayaking, I could do that when I was 65, you know, and can't do the other sports or something. But then I went and did it, and I was like, wow, this is a pretty incredible sport. I saw more wildlife sea kayaking, you know, right there. That's in Johnstone Straits, or north of Vancouver Island. And just an epic location. We're like the last island before you're in open ocean there. The coast mountains. It's just a gorgeous spot, and very well said. Orca popping up left and right. We had humpback whales breaching all over the place. I mean, I've never seen more wildlife on a trip than I did on that trip. So it really felt connected here in a way that I don't necessarily feel on a lot of my other trips. But, you know, there's other images, like some of my base jumping images and wingsuit flying images that I do with Red Bull, where it's just a crazy experience, you know, rappelling over the edge of a 3,000-foot cliff, hanging off of tiny little bushes, you know, and never waiting in the rope, like that image right there where he's jumping off the cliff, you know. But that's just kind of part and parcel of the job, so you don't necessarily, I don't necessarily think that they haven't got to do. It's just, I've got so many of these stories, it's kind of hard to pick. You know, I'm still here because I've had
these are pretty amazing. So yeah, it's like choosing a favorite child, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have a lot of people that influenced your work early on? You know, so do you have people that growing up you used to look up to them and look at their work and take inspiration from it? And then the second part is, how would you describe your style if you have one today?
Yeah. I would say it's more, you know, painters, sculptors like Dali is a really big inspiration. Picasso, you know, some of the Renaissance painters, and then like Rodin, some of the sculptors. So it comes a lot from the art world. William Turner actually is a painter that really influenced me a lot, who did these really watercolors, mostly oceanscapes. You know, there were lots of, I took in everything. I mean, I definitely saw tons of climbing and outdoor adventure images early on, and it was all the peers and those ahead of me, like Morale is a good example. I think most, you know, outdoor adventure photographers of any sort, even landscape photographers, would say Galen Morale was a huge influence, because he basically invented my career, you know, in the 70s and 80s. Okay. And I don't know, these days it's my peers, it's, you know, those photographers I look up to, like Stephen Wilkes, Albert Watson. There's a whole host of people who are creating incredible work out there these days. You know, my peers like Lucas Gilman and Corey Rich, Jimmy Chin, you know, all these days just to fit my genre and all the work they're doing. And then for me, I'm constantly trying to push the envelope of what's technologically possible, not just with the cameras, but also with the lighting, and then getting myself into crazy positions to like create something new and different, because that's how you stand out as a professional. And that's why somebody would hire you over somebody else, is because you can do something slightly different. My style, in terms of my images, I would say I've got a very clean, kind of understated style. For some of my work, it's, you know, obviously lit with strobes, and that's created a whole different genre of style in my work. But, you know, hopefully super high end. With the strobe stuff, there's kind of this like hyper real look to it, just because I'm trying to mimic sunlight a lot of times, so it doesn't look super manufactured. But it does give like a poppiness to the images for those specific things. It's hard to describe your own style. I mean, I can recognize other photographer styles very easily, even before I see their name on the picture. And then my peers have actually told me what my style is. You know, where I'm like, oh, your images, I can recognize your images a mile away. So it just depends on, you know, my compositions, or everybody's compositions are slightly different.
Well, what are some of the things that you're excited about?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think for most photographers these days, any assignments we did have or projects that were in the works are completely on hold, if not canceled at this point. So, you know, I've been working here in the office. I just produced, re-updated my digital workflow ebook, which is like a 500, almost 600 page ebook on digital workflow. That's on the people want to explore that. I just put out my latest newsletter as well, which is a marketing piece, but it's like a PDF magazine. It actually has a full feature article, and there is the article about that Marine Special Forces shoot. That I can get back out, and maybe there's some clients that need something and or would like to do some shoots. We'll have to see, you know, because I'm kind of socially distanced already from some of the athletes. If we just really concentrate on that, I can drive somewhere, do a shoot where I never really see anybody, camp, you know, just totally self-isolate, and me and the athlete stay 20 feet apart or something. And maybe we can do that. We'll wait till the hospitals die down. There's not that many cases, of course, but.
And we, of course, have a number of photojournalists that use our gear in the front lines with COVID-19, because it also works the other way. So the covers can help protect the camera, because just like a cell phone, the camera can actually be a contagion element with all the flat surfaces, especially if you're putting it close to your face. And so we've had a lot of photojournalists that have been using it for that. And I think with sports, on one hand, it's tough because a lot of sports don't want to start back up with large events. On the other hand, I think storytellers and people that are documenting what the athletes are doing are going to become even more important, because maybe the audience, live audience, has to go down. There's going to be more documented, televised, broadcast, web series type sporting events.
Totally.
So that, you know, people like you become an even more integral part of bringing those stories to a larger, massive audience.
It's been a great career. I mean, I can't imagine all the stuff I've seen in 25 years, the things I've been able to do. I wouldn't want any other lifestyle.